What if I told you that a company most people still can't buy shares in could soon become one of the most valuable companies in human history? Sounds impossible? Maybe. But right now, investors around the world are asking a very simple question. How high can SpaceX really fly? And before you answer that, let me ask you something. If someone gave you $10,000 today and said, you can only invest it in one company, would you choose a company that sells phones? A company that sells cars? A company that sells software? Or would you choose a company trying to build the future of humanity itself? Think about that for a second, because that question is exactly why SpaceX has become one of the most talked about companies on Earth. Today, investors are discussing valuations that could place SpaceX among the largest companies ever created. Not millions, not billions, trillions. And that's where things become fascinating. Because this story isn't really about rockets. It's about belief. It's about risk. It's about human psychology. And it's about why people are willing to place enormous amounts of money behind a vision that many once considered impossible. Now here's something funny. When Elon Musk first started talking about reusable rockets, many experts thought it sounded ridiculous. Some people believed he was wasting his money. Others believed he was chasing science fiction. And let's be honest, if your neighbor told you he was going to build rockets, launch satellites, create a global internet network from space, and help humans become a multiplanetary species, you might suggest he take a long vacation. Yet, here we are. The same ideas that once sounded crazy are now attracting billions of dollars in investment. So what changed? Did the world suddenly become smarter? Or did people simply start believing? Because belief is one of the most powerful forces in finance. Investors don't only buy companies. They buy stories. They buy expectations. They buy possibilities. And nobody understands that better than Elon Musk. Now let me ask you another question. What makes a company valuable? Is it the money it earns today? Or is it the money people believe it could earn tomorrow? Because if valuation were based only on current profits, many of the world's biggest companies would look very different. Markets often reward potential. And few companies have more potential than SpaceX. Think about everything SpaceX is involved in. Rocket launches, satellite internet, government contracts, national security projects, global communications, future space transportation, and perhaps one day, industries that don't even exist yet. That last part is important, because investors aren't just looking at today's revenue, they're looking at future possibilities. And future possibilities can be worth extraordinary amounts of money. Now here's where psychology enters the picture. Human beings are naturally attracted to big visions. We admire explorers. We admire innovators. We admire people willing to attempt what others consider impossible. That's why stories matter so much in business. A company with a compelling vision often attracts more attention than a company with ordinary goals. And SpaceX may have one of the most compelling visions ever created. But let's slow down for a moment, because excitement can be dangerous. Have you ever noticed how investors sometimes become too optimistic? How fear can push prices down? And excitement can push prices up. Financial history is full of examples. People get excited, money flows in, expectations grow. Then reality arrives. So here's an important question. Could SpaceX truly justify a valuation measured in trillions? Or are investors getting carried away by excitement? That's the debate happening right now. And honestly, there are intelligent people on both sides. Supporters argue that SpaceX is building infrastructure for the future. Critics argue that even great companies can become overvalued. So who's right? Nobody knows. And that's what makes investing so fascinating. Because investing isn't about certainty. It's about probability. Every investor is making a prediction about the future. and the future has a habit of surprising everyone. But whether SpaceX eventually reaches those extraordinary valuations or not, something remarkable has already happened. A company that many people once dismissed has changed entire industries. It has transformed the economics of space travel. It has challenged governments. It has forced competitors to adapt. And perhaps, most importantly, it has shown what can happen when ambition meets persistence. So maybe the biggest lesson isn't about SpaceX. Maybe the biggest lesson is about human nature. Because throughout history, every breakthrough looked impossible until someone made it real. Every revolutionary idea was questioned. Every innovator faced doubt. And every great success began as a vision that most people couldn't yet see. Which brings us back to the question we started with. How high can SpaceX really fly? Maybe the better question is this: how high can human ambition fly when enough people believe in it? But here's where the story becomes even more interesting, because investors aren't simply betting on what SpaceX is today. They're betting on what SpaceX could become. And those two things are very different. Let me ask you a question. What do Amazon, Apple, Tesla, and Nvidia have in common? At one point, most people underestimated them. Many investors looked at those companies and said, "It's too expensive. It's overhyped. It can't get much bigger." Yet history had other plans. Now, does that mean SpaceX will follow the same path? Not necessarily. But it does explain why investors are paying attention. Because sometimes the biggest opportunities appear before the rest of the world fully understands them. Now imagine you're sitting in a boardroom. You have billions of dollars to invest. You can put that money into a mature company growing at 5% per year. Or you can invest in a company that could potentially reshape multiple industries at once. Which option would you choose? That's the exact dilemma many investors face today. And that's why SpaceX has become such a fascinating case study. But let's go deeper, because this isn't just about money. It's about human psychology. Have you ever noticed that people are naturally attracted to extraordinary stories? Nobody gathers around the dinner table to discuss a company that grew 3% last year. But tell them a company is trying to revolutionize space travel. And suddenly, everyone is paying attention. Humans are storytellers. We've always been storytellers. And the biggest companies in history often become powerful because they own powerful stories. Apple sold a vision of personal technology. Tesla sold a vision of electric transportation. And SpaceX is selling a vision that extends beyond Earth itself. Now that's a story people remember. But here's a question that very few people ask. What happens if expectations become too high? Because expectations can be dangerous. When investors expect greatness, good results may not be enough. Think about that. Imagine getting 95 out of 100 on a test. Most people would celebrate. But if everyone expected you to score 100, 95 suddenly looks disappointing. The stock market works in a similar way. Sometimes companies don't fail because they perform poorly. They fail because expectations were unrealistic. So while many people are focused on how high SpaceX can fly, smart investors are also asking, how high are expectations already? And that's where risk enters the conversation. Because every great opportunity comes with uncertainty. Every great success story comes with obstacles. And if there's one thing history teaches us, it's that the future rarely unfolds exactly as planned. Now let me ask you something. Do you think building rockets is difficult? Of course it is. But building rockets might actually be the easy part. Building a trillion-dollar company? That's a completely different challenge. Because now you're dealing with governments, global markets, competition, regulations, economic cycles, technology shifts, and millions of investors with different expectations. That's a lot of pressure. In fact, most companies would collapse under that pressure, which makes SpaceX's journey even more remarkable. Because despite all the obstacles, the company keeps moving forward. Launch after launch, innovation after innovation, year after year. And that's one of the reasons investors continue paying attention. Not because success is guaranteed, but because progress has been consistent. Now here's something interesting. The world's most valuable companies don't just create products. They create ecosystems. Apple created an ecosystem. Amazon created an ecosystem. Google created an ecosystem. And SpaceX may be building one as well. Think about it. Rockets, satellites, global internet, government contracts, defense partnerships, artificial intelligence connections, future transportation systems. Each piece strengthens the others. And that's exactly what investors love to see. Not a single product, but an interconnected network of opportunities. So here's the big question. If SpaceX eventually becomes worth $2 trillion, will people say the valuation was obvious? Probably. That's what people always say after success happens. But right now, nothing feels obvious. And that's what makes this moment so fascinating. Because we're watching a story unfold in real time. A story about ambition, innovation, risk, belief, and one of the most extraordinary companies of the modern era. But before we talk about what could happen next, we need to discuss something even more important. What happens if the dream doesn't go according to plan? But now we arrive at the part of the story that nobody likes talking about. The risk. Because every great opportunity comes with an uncomfortable question. What if we're wrong? Think about that for a moment. What if the future doesn't unfold the way investors expect? What if technology changes? What if competition becomes stronger? What if regulations slow growth? What if the economy enters a recession? Suddenly, the story becomes more complicated. And that's why investing is never as simple as people make it sound. Many people think investing is about predicting winners. In reality, it's often about managing uncertainty. And uncertainty is something most humans hate. Have you ever noticed how people constantly search for certainty? They want guaranteed success, guaranteed returns, guaranteed outcomes. But life doesn't work that way. And neither do markets. The truth is, nobody knows exactly what SpaceX will be worth 10 years from now. Not the media, not analysts, not investors, not even Elon Musk. The future remains unwritten, and that's precisely why the opportunity exists. Because if everyone already knew the outcome, there would be no reward for taking the risk. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever looked back at your own life and realized that the biggest opportunities often felt uncomfortable at the beginning? Maybe it was a new job, a business idea, a difficult decision, or a risk that others didn't understand. Most life-changing opportunities don't arrive carrying a guarantee. They arrive carrying uncertainty. And that's one reason why stories like SpaceX resonate with people around the world. Because in many ways, the company represents something deeply human. The willingness to attempt something difficult. The courage to pursue a vision. The determination to keep moving forward despite setbacks. And whether you're interested in rockets or not, that's a lesson everyone can understand. Because success rarely belongs to the people who never fail. Success often belongs to the people who keep going after failure. Now here's a question for you. Do you think Elon Musk knew exactly how this journey would unfold? Of course not. Nobody does. But he was willing to move forward despite uncertainty. And that's a mindset that separates many extraordinary achievements from ordinary ones. Not certainty. Action, not guarantees. Persistence, not perfect predictions. Continuous learning. That's true in business. It's true in investing, and it's true in life. Which brings us to perhaps the most important lesson in this entire story. The real value of SpaceX isn't just measured in dollars. It's measured in possibility. Possibility changes the way people think. Possibility inspires innovation. Possibility attracts talent. Possibility creates momentum, and sometimes, possibility creates entire industries. Just imagine how many young engineers, entrepreneurs, scientists, and dreamers have been inspired simply by watching a rocket land successfully. Think about that. A single achievement can influence millions of people. A single idea can change the direction of an entire generation. And that's why this story matters. Because it's not just a financial story, it's a human story. A story about ambition. A story about belief. A story about what happens when people refuse to accept limitations. Now, does that mean SpaceX will definitely become one of the most valuable companies in history? Nobody knows. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But perhaps that's the wrong question. Maybe the better question is this: what kind of future becomes possible when people are willing to think beyond what seems realistic today? Because throughout history, the future has always belonged to the people willing to imagine it first. And whether SpaceX eventually reaches $2 trillion, $3 trillion, or something entirely different, one thing is already clear. The company has changed the conversation. It has changed expectations. And it has reminded the world that some of the biggest opportunities often begin as ideas that sound impossible. So the next time someone tells you that a goal is too ambitious, that a vision is too large, or that a dream is unrealistic, remember this story. Because history has a strange habit of rewarding the people who dare to attempt what others consider impossible. And perhaps the biggest lesson isn't about rockets at all. Perhaps it's about human potential, about belief, about persistence, and about the extraordinary things that can happen when ambition refuses to stay grounded. So now, I'll leave you with one final question. If you had the chance to invest in the future itself, would you recognize the opportunity before everyone else? Or would you only believe in it after the world had already changed?